have,
Mhm.
I'm sure we'll be having other people join us, but we have Tatiana and Carrie on the line that are MidNorth Promise family. So I wanted to take a second and introduce you guys to Vanessa Silva. Vanessa is a new intern that's working in our department. So you'll see her on our workshop calls, or you may be getting calls from her for information. She's going to be working closely with Angelina. And then we have
Mhm.
another intern who's not on the call tonight. It's Richard, and he will be working closely with Kelsey. So we are excited to welcome them to our team. So that is, I wanted to kind of start off with that announcement. Hey, Monica. So tonight we invited Denise back so we can talk about the new year and all that we went through in 2020 and unpack some of that. So I'm going to let Denise take it from there.
Thank you, Angela. And thank you, Angelina, and all of you who are part of this fantastic group. And I'm just so impressed that you have this gathering and this group of people regularly to come and talk about some important things. And I'm really happy to come back and have some more discussion with you. And I wanted to just ask, I wanted to check in uh, for each of you to kind of tell me a summary of your 2020. And then we can go from there in terms of talking about what that summary or what those summaries reflect. What do they say? And we'll talk a little bit about what's helpful, what we've learned, what we're still learning, and what we don't know yet, and as well as some helpful tips to get through these times. So let me just start by asking uh, any of you and speak up. Um, Whoever wants to share, tell me a little bit about your 2020 and especially how the holidays were compared to what you're used to.
Well, 2020 was terrible. Terrible.
Mhm.
I think I'll have PTSD from it. But
Mhm.
holidays were different. It was quieter. I enjoyed that part, but I didn't get to see my family because my parents got COVID.
Oh, wow.
That was kind of upsetting, but
Mhm.
it is what it is.
How are they now?
Um, they're fine now. My dad had it worse. He was just tired, very, very tired.
Mhm.
You're doing okay now.
Good, good, good. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Mhm. Who else? What else?
Well,
Mhm.
I'll go. I think
Mhm.
my 2020 is very similar to Carrie's. Um, I'm in healthcare as well, so it's been hard. I work in a long-term care facility, and we were able to not have COVID in our facility until probably I would say about 3 months ago. And when it
Mhm.
came, and it came hard. So we're just trying to
Mhm.
recoup from that. But holidays were quiet as also.
Mhm.
I'm not from here, so I don't have any family here except my husband and my son. So I haven't been able to see my mom, which is hard.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm ready for this upswing. I'm ready to get back to normal. I'm over here the new normal. I want to get back to the old normal with a little bit of new. You know.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. That's a good
Yeah.
way to put that. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Anyone else want to describe their 2020? Hi, Portia.
Hello.
Portia, we're sharing our 2020 and our holidays, how those
Mhm.
things went for us.
Talk about some risky business.
Mhm.
I,
Mhm.
I reached out and my husband and our youngest daughter and a daughter and her children, we caravanned to Orlando, spent a week at a resort, Blue Green, which we love, and visited with two of my sons, one of which is a school teacher who contracted COVID, and he was out of quarantine and better, and I had to go see him.
Mhm.
And then my husband and I, with one of my granddaughters and my youngest, decided that we would drive across from Florida to Texas to go check on my mom, who was not wanting a visit because of quarantine, but because we hadn't seen her since February, and I had to put some love into my mama. We went to Dallas, Texas, and brought in the new year.
Mhm.
And my brother joined us, did a little visit with some of his college buddies down in Houston, and caught COVID. But thank grace of God, we
Oh
did
my.
not contract it from him, and we made it back to Indianapolis safe. And as far as the
Good.
quarantine process of how my year has been, risky business, because I'm going to tell you, e-learning, webbing, zooming, the 20 pounds I done put on, the recipes that people send that you're making and you're cooking and you're baking more than you ever would have, and the house cleaning that you did that you're mad about that you had time to do. I'm and
Mhm.
who wants to go to the doctor via a virtual visit? I'm telling you, other
Yeah.
than that and being
Mhm.
stuck on oxygen from this whole
Mhm.
pandemic catastrophe,
Yeah.
grace and mercy and miracles have brought me through.
Wow. Wow. That's wonderful. And thank you for how you described your journey, because that was a real journey that you took
And
to
they drove
Florida.
all of that, Denise.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
They drove the entire
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, her
Wow.
husband drove the entire time.
Yes, 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 he did.
Thank you for
Hi.
recognizing.
Hey, Mr. Jackson.
Yeah. 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 But I appreciate too how it was beauty in those visits. There was family in those visits. There was concern because some family contracted COVID, and yet there was grace in that journey as well. And so I think that, that really is a good way to think about what this past year and what we're still living with depicts, because in it are great changes, great challenges, uh, necessary adaptations to our usual routine. When you talk about Zoom calls and webinars and meetings, I think everybody on this call right now could tell us a lot of stories about Zoom calls and meetings. And, I think somebody should put together a show of the facial expressions that people have on various Zoom meetings. Because that could be either a comedy or a horror show. I tell staff all the time that I wish I could capture a movie of their faces during a meeting, because some are in different positions. Some people are like this, there are all kinds of expressions that really look like they're not ready for prime time. But I think people don't always realize themselves in an arena like this.
Mhm.
And I think too, people don't realize how much energy it takes to be on a two-dimensional platform, that you are pouring out a lot of your energy, a lot of yourself, listening, trying to read the people that you're talking to, trying to concentrate and pay attention. And it takes a lot of energy. And so you might find yourself being really tired after one meeting, let alone 5 or 6 that you might have during the day. So have any of you had that experience in your daily lives of this past year, of just having to meet people over virtual calls? Has that been a challenge?
This is Monica.
Hi, Monica.
To answer, hello, I'm sorry for joining a little late. I just want to answer your question. And with that, with all the Zoom calls, I don't mind, but when it started, when the pandemic started, and I would have to, it was normal for me to do video calls at work. But when I had to do it outside of work, it got a little consuming because, I was sometimes had to do Zoom calls for school or for other things that, I'm working on outside of work. So it can get overwhelming and consuming. And some nights I'll be like, okay, I can't join tonight. It's just, it's a lot. And I find myself having to put on multiple reading glasses. I'm like, okay, that's not strong enough. I have to switch because it's just looking at
Yeah.
that computer
Yep.
screen and constantly just on those video calls. It can get to be a lot. And some days I just like I can't do it. I
Yeah.
hate to miss the information, but I just have to take a break sometimes. So I
Yeah.
agree with
Yeah. That's a great point in terms of the what it demands of you, and also what your body goes through with the number of screen time, the amount of screen time that all of us are on, especially around reading glasses and needing glasses. And I find myself that I normally don't wear glasses, but I have to wear glasses to be on screen. And if I don't have my glasses nearby, when I'm just reading other things, I cannot see very well. So I know my eyesight has changed during this time. So that's interesting. Really, really good points. Before I go on, any other thoughts or input about how your year has changed in this time of COVID and other things?
Well, I'll share a little bit, even though I know this isn't, I mean, I'm part of the team. I think a challenge for us is, I know for Shayna and I, we'd only been at the museum since October and November of 2019. And then suddenly, then Angelina had just joined our team permanently. And then suddenly we were home. So we were still trying to get to know each other as a team and figure out how we worked best and how we
Yes.
communicated with one another. And we've had to do all of that virtually. So I think so after we did June celebration, I was over working from home.
Yeah.
So because
Yeah.
I'm just not designed that way.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, a cute couple months is okay. But then when it got to be July, August, I was like, oh my goodness, this could be forever. So that was an adjustment. But I think that we got it done, and we've been able to do a lot of really good work virtually, but I do prefer being in the workspace.
Right, right. And I can't know this for certain, but some of you are more extroverted than introverted. And for those of you who really enjoy being around people, working with people, and you derive energy from input from a lot of people, being isolated during this time of COVID has been difficult. And for some people, they've experienced that as stressful. But that connection, maintaining connections, especially teams, being able to work with staff, being able to work with your teams, being able to feel like you get to know each other, not just know each other, but know the culture of the place that you're working. That's hard to do when you're not physically on site. And so that's something to look forward to, I think, as we transition back into our offices. But that's one of the costs, I think, that we don't always realize beforehand. So that's some of the pre-COVID and after COVID costs. One of the things that I also notice is that while there might have been these stressors, these challenges that weren't expected, but we had to learn to live with and adapt to, there might have always also been some nice findings in your routine, things that you did because you were home more, or because you didn't have the demands, the same demands that you had once before. So I want to know, have you discovered something new, or started something different that you really are glad that you did, and you wouldn't have done it had it not been for COVID, or had not been for being at home? For instance, some people have totally redesigned their houses, or done really big improvement projects, or they've done different types of projects as a result of being home. It could be something like that, or it could be other things that you've started, other habits, other things that was more about self-care, or things that you've done with your family that, as you look at it, it turns out to be something you want to keep once COVID is over. Anything like that?
We've been doing some family projects, things that we may have considered hiring someone to do, such as cleaning and restaining the deck, taking care of staining some floors and painting bedrooms, and things that we have been putting off. Was thinking of having someone do, we did ourselves, but then realizing we have an opportunity to fellowship and eat together, but now we put limits on our expectations. Nobody brings their device to the table now, and we're spending more time talking and playing games. Uno, Dad, Rummy, Sorry. We're doing more things like that we hadn't had time to do. And it's been very rewarding, and I'm hoping that it's something that we will continue to our game nights.
Yeah. That's great that you've been able to discover those kinds of activities. It's a way of simplifying life a little bit. I think it's a great way to deal with some of just the normal life stressors, but the additional stressors that come with this time of COVID as well. Yeah. Anyone else have discovered or developed some new activities that they do that's helpful or nurturing? No? Okay. I do want to share with you a little bit of the challenges that
Kelsey
we've
said
seen.
something in the chat. I forgot she can't
Okay,
speak.
I forgot her thing doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
she says, I've definitely been walking more since I've been home with her dog.
Okay.
Her and Juno have been spending a lot of time getting outside and exercise and exploring the great outdoors.
Okay. All right. Great. That's great. So yeah, a lot of people have, because they're not able to get out and do as much outside in the work setting, getting out, walking, exercising, whether that's at the store or with one or two people, doing things with family more, having more family time. Those kinds of things are offsetting some of the typical daily stressors that people can feel. What about kids? What are some of the stressors do you notice that young people are having, whether it's your own children or children that you're close to? What are some of those concerns?
I don't have nothing to do. Can we go somewhere? Why can't we go to the skating rink? Can we please go to the mall?
Yeah. The thing about it is that kids are kids, and developmentally, there's just things that young people want to do and need to do because that's just part of where they are. getting with people, engaging, interacting with their friends, even in a time of COVID where that couldn't happen because of safety concerns. You would see young people risk those interactions just because they needed the connection. And you saw this a lot with college students. You see this even with high school students, that while they may not have school, they will seek ways to have connections with their friends or with each other in other ways, whether that is sneaking out and going to a party, or whether that's avoiding the restrictions and going to these big parties that you saw on the news a lot at these gatherings. And I don't think it was because they were just saying, oh, we don't want to listen to these mandates. I think there are real developmental necessary needs to be connected and be with each other. So there's that need for interaction and interpersonal connection that I think is normal. And so while it can feel frustrating and it can be difficult for you to have to say no or put those limits and boundaries there, know that their requesting and their push for those interactions is not just normal, but I think it even gets stronger when they can't do it. And think of it like this: anytime you've told yourself, okay, I'm not going to have cake, or I'm not going to have this thing, or I'm not going to have that thing, you start to want it all the more, right? And I think that's just a natural part of how our brain works. Whenever we feel like we are being restricted from something, we tend to have all of a sudden a need for it, even when we didn't have that need before. One of the things that we are also seeing during this time, and I think it is a response to stress, is an increase in alcohol use. People, when they don't feel like they can have their normal outlets that they normally have, sometimes people then will resort to drinking more. And so we've seen a lot of those needs go up, and people need support for that. I think, Portia, you're one that we're talking about med appointments being virtual rather than in person, and missing that connection, even for those short periods of time with people like your medical care people. Those things are important. So I'm saying all of this to say that in our time of COVID, we have missed important ways of connecting. We've missed some important ways of knowing people. We've missed some important ways of learning. And all of those things have added to some stress. But along with that, I think many people, when they've been able to find alternative activities that they might not have otherwise discovered or taken the time to do, like games, like a hobby, like doing something like puzzles or coloring. Those are the kinds of things that I think can help center us in, quiet us down a little bit, and allow us to wait until it's time to come back into a fuller routine. There's two areas that I wanted to talk with you about and just get some of your feedback. And it relates to students. One relates to students, and the other relates to how we can maintain our sense of empowerment as we continue to go through COVID and look forward to some things changing in 2021. So I want to start with students. How many of you have students in your household, or you work with students, or you know some students, maybe not related to them, but you are somehow connected to what happens to student learning? Okay. Okay. One of the things that I think COVID has had an incredible impact on is learning and how students are learning. And there's kind of three main ways in which this is happening. One is You have students that traditionally have done well. They're self-starters. They enjoy school. School has not been a difficulty for them. And so while they were in school with their classmates, they did pretty well. But during COVID, they were still able to maintain their grades and pretty much stay on task with virtual learning. So they were kind of self-starters enough where they didn't lose any ground. That's one group of students. Another group of students are those students that did pretty well while they were in school, but once they had to go to virtual learning, they struggled with staying motivated, with staying interested enough to get the assignments in, or feeling like there wasn't enough engagement from the teacher or the school side to really help them with their learning. And these are students that are not self-learners. They're social learners. So that social connection and staying motivated and staying connected was really important. And because of that, they are about 1 month to 6 months behind in their learning. And that is affecting their semester grades, and it may affect their grades going into the end of the year. So we're looking at that second group of students who need a little additional support that they can't get solely on their own as a self-learner. Then there's the third group. The third group are students who, the third group are students who, without that extra support, either through teachers or tutors or some type of structured learning, being home and expected to do the self-learning on their own, they have lost almost a whole school year. And so those are students that may be at risk of failing a school year, or if they don't fail, they will have lost 7 to 10 months of learning this year that they will have to work to catch up next year when they're back in school on a more regular basis. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what this means for parents, what this means for schools, what this means for students. And let me ask you, does that make sense, what I was just describing about those 3 types of students? Yeah. And can you share with me a little bit of your thoughts or your observations about any of that? If you've heard of that or you've wondered about that with students that you know. Why do you think that's important? Particularly those who are a semester behind or a full year behind in their learning.
I didn't want to feel like I was talking so much, but I'm a foster parent.
Mm-hmm.
And during this quarantine, I have had 3 students that were middle schoolers who 2 had IEPs, and e-learning with them not needing one-on-one instruction hasn't been very good. I'm sorry, the kids are doing a Bible study Zoom in the other room.
Okay.
I tried to get far away from them. I hope that you can hear me over them.
Yes, we can.
But I've been blessed that I've been able to have a resource educator come, but you have to be the voice and advocate for the student about the work. And no, Lord knows, I don't know the new math. And so there are certain processes.
I don't either, Portia. I don't know the new math either.
But the processes that they have to learn now, you almost are having to go to school with them, and as well as provide safe places for them to
Mhm.
learn. And then, do you let them work independent? That's not always good. Sometimes you need them sitting right here with you to keep them on track. And
Right.
it's been a struggle. And yes, the problem that I'm coming to is that these kids that are a semester and a year behind, they will move on. So then we're relying on the instruction of the school system to truly be patient with them to get them moving along.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I'm scared.
Mhm. Yeah. And so it's about how to identify this as a real issue. And I think the schools are aware of it as well. Teachers are aware of it as well. But the same thing that the students are going through and their frustration and not feeling like they're getting the adequate support. I wonder if teachers are going through that as well. I think everyone is affected by this in such a way that everyone is experiencing some type of loss in their learning. And so, sometimes we think the teachers have all the answers. And I think COVID was one of those things where the systems, not the individuals, the systems were inadequate to provide what was needed and how to meet the need of not only the students, but the teachers as well. So that's one area that I wanted to discuss a little bit so that you could be advocates, that you could offer support to teachers, to parents, to those who are involved in educating and helping students to grow, that you could have discussions. There might be ways to have some discussions around this topic, even at the museum. And I'm just wondering if there's a way that people will come to you and say, hey, is this something that we can do that's going to help our kids, our young people? This cuts across all academic lines. This cuts across all cultures. This how learning is impacted, but particularly for Black and Brown students, this is going to have an impact. Right now, we're providing services for a program that we have called REACH, and it helps students really focus on their study strengths and getting them ready for employment at Warren Central. And they asked us to work with their seniors because they have 135 seniors that are failing their last semester and they are at risk of not graduating. And can you imagine being a senior and you were looking forward to your senior year and you're looking forward to graduating and that being at risk? So I think that there's a lot of things that has not probably surprised, but they didn't expect that they would find themselves in this situation the way they are now. And so think about ways to continue conversations around supporting students, supporting parents, supporting teachers, so that learning loss isn't a long-term effect of COVID. This is something that I think is going to happen on a community level as well as a systems level. I think schools are going to be talking about this. I think legislators will be talking about this because this will need to be addressed on a number of different levels. Do you think that's helpful to know or helpful to think about?
Denise, how are you guys supporting those 135 students? What are they putting in place to support them?
Yes, we are running 7 groups a week with those students with our REACH program. And not all of those students are engaged because they won't even engage in their credit recovery class. That's how unmotivated and sometimes depressed students are, I think, because of some are just done. They're just tired of it. And it's not because they're not able to succeed, it's because they need something other than this two-dimensional to interact with, to say you are important, you matter, we want you to succeed. And I think without that person that takes that interest in them, they just turn off. I think with this program that we're offering, because they know that it's different, it's not school, they're more interested and they're more engaged. So slowly but surely, they're reconnecting. But we might get maybe a third of that 135. I don't know. So this is something that is not just developing, but it's something that's kind of gotten exacerbated during COVID. And I think it's going to take all of us to kind of bear in mind, okay, how do we pay attention to this and how do we help those families and those students?
Yeah. My
So
son
that's one thing I wanted to
yeah.
get us to think about.
My son falls in that. He's a senior too.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I said my son is a senior this year, so he graduates this spring. So, and it has been a little bit of a challenge. It's because it definitely is not what we pictured his senior year to look like.
Right. And I think that's happening for a number of people. So I just wanted to kind of share that and see what we might be able to think about in the future that can help support that. And then another thing I wanted to share with you is the so what of all this. How can we start to feel engaged? How can we start to feel energized for what's coming next? You know, we talked a little bit before about there's a change in the administration on a national level, and there's some excitement about that. But what are some things that each of us can do that says, you know, my thoughts matter, my opinions matter, my experiences matter? Does it really have a voice? Does it really, will it really take me somewhere? And so I wanted to ask you, and I'll need your help with this, what are your thoughts about, hopefully we'll start seeing an impact with COVID with the vaccines, that'll be rolling out. But what do you think, what do you hope is going to be the next thing for you as we go into 2021? How will you be motivated? How will you use your voice? How will you be connected?
I would say as a parent, just making sure you're engaged and keep yourself engaged with the schools and with the teachers, because a lot of the teachers, like you said, they're very, they're confused too, they're stressed. I try to motivate my kids, teachers, giving them like motivational things for gifts for Christmas, things like that. And it just really perks them because they were like, wow, I didn't think anybody would think of me, So I'm that thoughtful type mom. So I do things like that. So, to kind of keep them motivated and making sure they just always emphasize, make sure you reach out, let us know if you need anything, things of that nature, and just helping others too. Other parents that might not know how to do better. Parents to come together more, because I've worked on PTOs and everything, and a lot of the parents just do not engage, even when we were in school, So the few of us that cared enough to, engage, and help out with the schools, it was like almost pulling teeth with some of the parents. So, that's what I always did, as I would do as a parent when we were all together.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm Kathy.
That's
Sorry,
good. Thank you for
we were
doing that.
rushing in from handling some things, so I'm sorry for the tardiness. And I'm getting over
that's okay.
illness myself, so I'm trying to get out and get
Well, hope you continue to feel better, and thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Any other thoughts about how you want to be motivated, how you want to be engaged, how you want to get your mojo back for 2021?
Because it's gone.
Yeah.
That's my main thing. Keep God first.
Yeah,
And pray.
absolutely. Yeah.
Kelsey knows that I'm always telling her, Kelsey, pray for me, or I'm praying for you. Because I'll pray. If you can't do anything else, pray.
Hmm.
Because that's what's going to get us through.
Exactly. I want to share with you, let's see if I can share my screen. I wanted to share with you something I put together and talking about, I was thinking about, there were some things that happened that seemed really almost impossible. How have people motivated communities? How have they motivated groups during times when it's been very difficult? They've had all these challenges. And then I thought about Stacey Abrams, and I thought, wow, what was her mindset? What were some things that she thought about that enabled her to, in her situation, help motivate a whole state of people and different groups to do some very hard work? And I put together some principles of her quotes, and I wanted to share those with you. And I'll send these to Angela so that she can share them with everyone else. But I thought I'd share a little bit of these with you in our talks, and if it sparks anything in you, see if that, please say what you find interesting about her quotes. This is from her book, Lead from the Outside, How to Build Your Future and Make Real Change. And I think that in some of these quotes, it might be helpful for us to think about how this speaks to us. One of the things that she says, she looks for practical steps for reflection and action. And she talked with first finding the truth in what it is that you're thinking about and working toward. And she says, finding the truth requires 3 simple questions. What's the problem? Why is it a problem? How do you want to solve it? That things can be a little bit more complicated than it appears, but if we first start with the truth, that gets us to where we want to be. The second thing she says is, rather than seeking expertise from the outside for what we want or what we think we deserve, look inward. Don't look at your fears only. Don't think about losing or not getting what you want, but at the great difference living out your ambitions can make. So as you're thinking about 2021, think about the difference living your ambitions can make for your life, no matter your circumstances, and how that can help make a difference in success. She also talks about converting imaginings into ambition. And so all of you have things that you've thought about for a little bit of time, and there's things you've thought about for a long time. But they've just been ideas or even dreams or wishes. She talks about how to turn that into ambition and realize that too big is not a good reason not to try. And I like that because that's good for me, and it'll be good for a senior, and it'll be good for a freshman and a 6th grader, right? So this is good for any of us. She also says that sometimes our fears really mask our ambition, and unmasking it can unleash your drive. So sometimes think about what you've been afraid of, what we've been afraid of during COVID, what we've been afraid we've lost, what we might be afraid of if we step out. Don't just look at the fear, because underneath the fear could be the very thing you need that's going to propel you to get something to happen. She also says that when you decide what you want and why you want it, take action immediately. Go for it. And defeating fear, and she calls our otherness. This is when she's talking about sometimes you can be in a group and you think that you compare yourself to someone else. And you compare yourself to what other people can do, what other people have, what other degrees they have, how smart you think they are, who they're connected with, who the people are that they know. And in doing that, we think of ourselves as other, that we somehow are different or not as good as. She says, defeating this sense of otherness, our fear of our otherness, means knowing who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and then using that, leveraging that otherness for your benefit. See, it doesn't matter what other people have or what they're doing or who they know or what skills they have. You have to believe that you are enough, that what you have is enough. Is that hitting anybody so far? Is that,
Definitely.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, she's very empowering.
Yeah, making what you have work. Taking power means taking stock and then taking time. Sometimes winning or getting what you want takes longer than you hoped for. Sometimes it takes longer than hope. So be in it for the long haul. It's okay. She says, though losing or failing may seem like a setback, these stumbles are inevitably part of the process to power. I love how she uses the word power, because she's not talking about power over, she's talking power within. And I think reclaiming some of this year means reclaiming our sense of power, some of the things that we feel like we've lost. She goes on to talk about leadership. She talks about to take power is to use the best of what resides within us. And it requires conscious effort. And then she talks about we have to move against what has historically been defined as the way we should live our lives or inhabit space. Move beyond that. So no matter what people have said, well, that's not how we do it. Just because it's been done a particular way doesn't mean it can't change. And then I made a quote, and I'm going to share this with you so that you have these slides yourself, but I just wanted to express it and you could think about it. She said, history is littered with stories of naysayers who decry newcomers and excoriate innovators. Human nature often turns us away from what hasn't yet been tried, even if we come to regret it later. Remember this, in the darkest moments, when the work doesn't seem worth it and change seems just out of reach, out of our willingness to push through comes a tremendous power. We use the fire of our passions and the angst of our opposition to push past the boundaries of what we expect of ourselves and what the world expects of us. We can harness this energy to lead from the outside and make real change. This is power. We are entitled, so use it. So I wanted to share that with you because I wanted to see if you thought that those words of inspiration, of reclaiming your sense of power, of looking within in the scope of what's happened in 2020 and what we're facing in 2021, that while these restrictions are imposed, they're not permanent. It's not going to be forever. And in the meantime, we are still who we are. And we're still learning. And we're learning some new things. How can we start taking some of these words and being ready, like shooting out like a cannon in some aspects when this COVID thing is over? Because I think our kids are going to need it. I think our systems are going to need it. I think almost everything that we have known and taken for granted is going to need something. It's going to need a new spirit. It's going to need some new energy, because none of our systems, none of these things that we're used to was ever designed with COVID in mind, with a pandemic in mind. And so we are in a time of creative change, creative power, creative opportunity. And I wanted to throw that out to you as an invitation to explore some of that creative energy, ambition, passion, desire that can be created in you. And I'm going to share this with you, Angela, and you, Angelina, so that you can share this with the rest of the group. And I have a research page. It's got about 4 or 5 links in it. And I also put those links in the chat that talks about more about mental health, talks about parent support groups and things like that. But I thought these kinds of things would be of more interest to you. Thoughts about Stacy and what she says as it relates to you. You're on mute. You're on mute.
No, I said we
Angela.
have a
There
quiet
you
group
go.
today.
That's okay. That was a lot of words I used there. Do you think those words about Stacy's reflections and her encouraging us in the way of thinking about ourselves, going inward, thinking about power, thinking about engagement, do you think that can be helpful for you personally?
Yeah. Oh, hello. I thought I was muted.
Okay.
Hi, this is Darius. It really, it resonates with me, and it really draws me back to some of the old like African proverbs and principles like Kuji Chagalia, and defining, you know, who you want to be in the world. And so I think our young people, you had spoke earlier about the students, they are so inundated with so much social media presence. You can't see it as a bad thing anymore because their generation has never lived without it. But when it comes down to self-identity and the things that make you thump, the connectedness to their culture has to get tied into the education, because the deficit was there before the pandemic. You know, it's convenient to blame Corona, but it didn't start at Corona. So now it's just exacerbated. And so I know I work with students and I have some at home, and more so than I had a similar problem with credit recovery, Miss Denise. But sometimes it's just about getting connected to the student, and it's not even about the work.
Right.
You're
you know, absolutely right.
I'm not a social worker or anything like that, but just, you know, if they log on saying, you know, I'm glad you logged on today, you know, or calling their mom and they like, could you really call my mother? Yeah, I really called your mother and got your cell phone number. You know, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do something. You know, we can't do everything, but we're gonna do something. And you know, that whole mattering that you were talking about, I think is really important. I probably have a third of my students as well in my credit recovery that actually attend. And it is heartbreaking because if they put in the time, they would get so much further along. But right now, the goal is just the engagement and the staying connected to something real in a world of social media. And now I'm going to mute.
Yeah. I so appreciated what you said. Everything you said, spot on, spot on. Yeah.
So
Well,
Denise,
I
do
hope
you have any
there
final
are.
words?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say if you have
Well,
any
yeah.
final words.
Well, one of the things that as we come to close is a word of encouragement. And that word is resilience. We are resilient people. And I say that not in terms of cultural specific, but people, human beings. We're resilient. We have come through hard and difficult times. We've come through some unforgiving times. We've come through some that feel like unbearable times, and yet we have survived and thrived. Many people have suffered tragic losses. Many people have suffered economic stress that's, unthinkable at times. And yet people are finding connections, ways of being supported and encouraged. So this resilience is something that I want us to think about as well. Think of ways that you are resilient. Think of ways in which your programs are resilient. Think of ways in which this is not all there is. And this is not the last word. I think at the core, and I think several of you have talked about tonight, there is a spiritual piece to everything that we do, whether it's claimed or not, whether it's known or not. And I think that as we stay connected to the source of your drive and your ambition and your resilience, that helps you to know that this is not all there is. And that no matter what is being thrown at you, whether it's COVID or whether it's job stress, whether it's stress with kids or whatever, that it is something that we will get through. And so I've included some resources that I hope will help. I've included a document about having difficult conversations with each other and with different groups. And I think that that can be helpful as well. And so what I'd like to do is send this to you so that you can have it. And then if we could have another conversation someplace down the road, at some point down the road, where we can follow up on the discussion. If you think that that could be helpful, having read what's been sent to you, I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to hear your thoughts to see what more we can do with it. Okay. Thank you for having me here today. It's good to see you. It's good to hear your stories.
Thank you, Denise, for joining us, and we'll try to get you back on our workshop calendar so we can go over the information that you sent. Really quickly, I know Angelina is going to launch our poll. So if you guys can take our doodle poll that we launch every month, and while she's getting that set up, just, here we go.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to log off. It's great to see you. Wish you a great rest of the week. Blessings to you. And we'll talk soon.
Bye, Denise.
Bye-bye.
Okay. In about 5 more seconds, I'll close it out. All right, I'm ending the poll. Thank you, guys.
So just a couple of things. For those of you who joined us later, I want to introduce you to Vanessa really quickly. Vanessa is a new intern with Community Initiatives, and she's going to be working really closely with Angelina over the next few months to a year. And we also have another intern whose name is Richard. So you'll be meeting him and hearing from him as they work on their projects. So we want to welcome them to our team. The next thing is our next workshop will be about summer opportunities for families. So we'll have different organizations that will come and talk to us about the summer programming that they're going to be offering this year, because it's about time to start getting people signed up, because you know the programs usually fill up pretty quickly. And then we talked a lot about advocating in education and within the classroom. So in February, Empower Ed is a new organization that has been started in the city where they are working with parents to help them to advocate for their children. So they are interested in getting MidNorth Promise Program families your input on what direction they should be going in. I know he said that there's 6 questions that they'll be asking you. So if you can plan on attending, that's the 3rd Thursday in February, and it'll be Empower Ed families. So they'll be joining us in February. So that's all I have. Oh, and just a reminder that we're still taking barrier buster applications through the end of March. So if you have a need or have been adversely affected by COVID-19, please feel free to send in a barrier buster application and we'll be try to get you some help. That's all I got. Angelina, you have anything?